Hi, it's Shawn Casemore, and thanks again for joining me on another one of my videos on how to empower your business. Do you have an employee that's a dud? Now, bear with me, I have a reason for calling them a dud. DUD stands for doesn't understand or do anything. Now, DUDs can be different people within your team or in your organization. Okay, these can be people that don't show up for work on a regular basis and don't seem to care that they should show up. These can be people that don't participate in group activities. They don't speak up. They're ignorant. They're rude. They push back on everything. Now, first off, before I talk about this term DUD and what it means, let's set aside any biases. I'm not here to suggest or downplay the importance of every employee because diversity amongst a team is necessary to ensure the team performs. But in reality, every team I've ever run into has some person, some individual that stands out. Now, fortunately, most of these, in my experience, at least 80% of these individuals that stand out in the team, that maybe aren't very similar to other folks in the team, can be, let's say, recuperated. They can be rejuvenated and they can be inserted back into the team in a productive manner. So we can get them showing up for work on time and actually wanting to be there. We can get them participating in group activities and performing at higher levels. It's all possible. But if you've tried everything you know and you reach a point you're stuck, and that can happen to any of us, then the challenge becomes, what do I do now? What's next for me? Well, what I want to share with you is a few things to consider if you're at that point with someone on your team. First off, ask yourself, have you set clear expectations with this individual? You might say, yeah, I sat down when I hired them, right? Or recently I had a discussion about their performance. Fair enough. But I'm saying you need to sit down with them and say, look, I just want to have a conversation about what I expect from all of my employees, yourself included, and get your feedback. Which of these are a challenge? Which of these do you disagree with? You need to have that conversation to set the stage for what may come next. So that's step one. Good news is, too, you can do that anytime. If they're a 30-year employee, you can sit down and have this conversation. But the key is making sure you use the word expectation when you have that conversation. And of course, like always, follow up with something in writing, because you have to remember, people absorb information in one of three different ways: audible, kinesthetic, and visual. So by sitting with them and having that dialogue, you're tapping into the visual and the kinesthetic aspect. But you also want to follow up in writing, right? And you want to make sure you're repeating a few things so that if they're audible, they're going to absorb that as well. With that said, if you've set expectations or you've tried step one and there's still some challenges there, step two is to make sure you're reviewing with them at minimum weekly. My preference is every other day, where I'm stopping by their desk, I'm stopping by where they're working, I'm catching them in the hall, and I'm saying, hey, how are things going today? How are you doing relative to the expectations? Do you think you're on track? Are there some new issues that have arisen that we should talk about? I got to keep checking back with them. And I find this is where a lot of leaders, CEOs, executives, managers, supervisors, team leaders, where they fail, is they don't make it a habit of consistently coming back to that individual to check in with them. And more importantly, you'll notice I keep saying have a dialogue. Dialogue means they're speaking to me. I'm getting their perspective. And the only way to do that is to ask questions and then zip it. Right? So second part of this is I've set some expectations. Now I'm doing periodic or better yet, frequent check-in to see how it's going. This is going to raise any flags, any specific issues that arise that we can then discuss and deal with before they become a problem. Now, if you've been doing that, you've been having these frequent dialogues and there's still a challenge, next step is, as you have these discussions, escalate the severity. Now, there's a way to do that. Just in your words and phrasing, make sure you're saying things like, this is the second time we've met on this topic. This is the third time, that we've met on this topic. Make sure you start to put everything you're saying in writing and provide a copy of the employee. Make sure you're suggesting things such as, if we can't resolve this soon, I fear we may have to start to look at progressive discipline, okay, or whatever, performance management, whatever you call it. You want to be upfront with that stuff. The reason so many employees push back when they get put into a performance management program, number one complaint I hear is, I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know we were at that point. So you want to make sure you're saying this not too early. But again, if you're escalating the severity of the issue, you're bringing it to their attention, you're having this dialogue, and you're referring back to expectations, If it's not working, you want to keep suggesting more and more so that we're heading in a direction I really don't want to go. In fact, that's the phrasing I've used in the past myself personally. You know, we're heading to a place I don't even really want to go, but you leave me no choice. And here's why. What are your thoughts on that? How can we avoid getting there? What can I do differently? What can you do differently? You see, it's all about the questions you ask, but keep in mind that severity. Now, if you're finding the severity is not working or it's having minimal impact on the employee, here's a last-ditch effort I'd like you to try before you actually put them into some sort of performance or official performance management program. Redeploy them. Move them to a different shift, move them to a different team, move them to a different part of the office, put them into another department, another role. Sometimes by changing the environment, you change the individual. Now, that could be for worse, but it could be for better. And that's kind of a last-ditch effort. And I've seen that work time and again. By changing up the shift, the group of people that individual works with, suddenly it changes their perspective. And once again, it escalates the severity. It lets them know you're serious because you're changing things up and you're moving them around. And that sends home or reinforces that message. Now, with all that said, if nothing else seems to work at that point, you may be forced to move into performance management. You may have no choice ultimately in what you need to do. But if you've gotten to this point, I'm going to suggest that of those people who are truly DUD, they fit that criteria, doesn't understand or do anything, okay, I'm going to suggest to you that 80% of people by this point will be recuperated and will be able to fit back into the team. There will be a 20%, 80-20 rule that probably will have to go into performance management, and of those, probably another 20% you're going to lose. But in essence, I want you to think about the individuals in your team that really are a challenge. You've done everything you think you can do that just isn't working, and then apply these 5 steps we've discussed in this video. Feel free to replay it again or share it with your colleagues, but use this information to help build a stronger team. Because as you know, as we've discussed in the past, your team will only perform as well as its weakest performer. I'm Shawn Casemore. Thanks again for joining me in another one of my Empowerment Series videos. I appreciate it. Feel free to contact me using any of the points below. Send me in topics you'd like to discuss, or if you've got someone who you consider a dud you'd like to talk about more strategies, reach out and let's talk about your specific situation and how I might be able to help. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.